You know, I still can't believe it happened. My sister, the one person who should have had my back, ripped the crutch right out of my hand at my own father's birthday party. She snapped, "Stop faking it. You're just leeching." And as I hit the hard tile floor, the sound of my family's laughter echoing around me. None of them had any idea that my surgeon, the man who knew exactly what I was going through, was standing right behind them. He stepped forward, his touch on my sister's shoulder freezing her mid-snicker, and the entire room went silent. Was I wrong for the quiet satisfaction I felt at that moment? Tell me, would you have done the same thing? It all started really about 6 months before that disastrous birthday. I'd always been the quiet one in our family, the one who didn't cause trouble, who just tried to get along. My sister, Sarah, on the other hand, was the golden child, the accomplished one, the pretty one, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. And she never let me forget it. I loved her, of course, in that complicated way only siblings can understand. But there was always this undercurrent of competitiveness, a constant need for her to be superior. My life, however, took a drastic turn one Tuesday morning. I was on my way to work, just a normal commute, when a delivery truck ran a red light. The screech of tires, the blare of a horn, and then a sickening crunch. I woke up in the hospital, my leg in a cast, a throbbing pain telling me that something was very, very wrong. The doctors told me I had a compound fracture of my tibia and fibula, a nasty break, they called it. It required extensive surgery, plates, screws, and a long, arduous recovery. I was told I'd be off my feet for months, relying on crutches, and that I might never fully regain the mobility I had before. It was a terrifying prospect. The initial weeks were a blur of pain medication, physical therapy, and the crushing weight of dependency. My parents, bless their hearts, tried to be supportive, but they'd always been a bit pragmatic. They helped with groceries, offered to drive me to appointments, but there was a distinct lack of emotional understanding. Sarah, true to form, was barely present. A few fleeting visits, a perfunctory "how are you doing?" And then she'd be off, always busy with something more important, something that validated her perfect life. I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on my recovery, on the small victories, wiggling a toe, taking a few steps with my crutches, the slow, agonizing process of learning to walk again. My job, thankfully, was understanding. They allowed me to work from home, which was a lifeline, both financially and mentally. But the pain, both physical and emotional, was constant. The loneliness was a heavy blanket that smothered me most nights. My friends tried their best, but it's hard to truly understand unless you've been through it. As the months wore on and my initial casts were replaced by a walking boot and the ever-present crutches, Sarah's subtle digs started to become less subtle. "Are you still on those things?" she'd ask, her tone laced with irritation, as if my injury was an inconvenience to her. "You know, you could try harder. My friend Brenda broke her leg, and she was running marathons in 3 months." She'd make comments about how expensive my medical bills were, even though insurance covered most of it, implying I was the burden. She'd hint that I was enjoying the attention, that I was milking it. It stung deeply. Every single word was a blow to my already fragile self-esteem. Our parents, who always seemed to side with Sarah, would often chime in with their own versions of tough love. "You need to push yourself." My dad would say, "Can't stay a cripple forever." My mom would suggest, "Maybe you should just try to walk without the crutches, dear. You look so much better when you're not leaning on them." It was infuriating, disheartening, and utterly draining. They saw my crutches not as a necessity, but as a crutch in itself, a symbol of weakness or, worse, an excuse to be lazy. They just didn't get it. They didn't understand the excruciating pain, the constant fear of falling, the sheer exhaustion that came with every single step. The birthday party for my father was supposed to be a small family gathering. I'd debated going, honestly. The thought of navigating a crowded house on my crutches, enduring Sarah's thinly veiled criticisms and my parents' well-meaning but hurtful advice filled me with dread. But it was my dad and I loved him, so I decided to brave it. I put on a brave face, chose an outfit that hid my bulky brace as much as possible, and made my way to their house. The moment I walked through the door, the familiar scent of my mom's cooking, the hum of family chatter, it almost felt normal. Almost then Sarah spotted me. She was holding court in the living room, surrounded by various aunts, uncles, and cousins, all hanging on her every word, as usual. She paused mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing as she took in my crutches. A small, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. I tried to ignore it, to find a quiet corner, but she was already making her way towards me. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, trying to celebrate my father's birthday, feeling vulnerable and misunderstood, and my sister was clearly gearing up for another one of her performances. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted her? Would you have just walked away and tried to salvage the evening? Or would you have stood your ground, bracing yourself for the inevitable confrontation? She sauntered over, a forced smile plastered on her face, but her eyes were cold. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. She drawled, loud enough for several relatives to turn and look. Still dragging those things around, huh? Don't you think it's time to move on? Dad's birthday isn't about your drama. I tried to keep my voice even, tried to diffuse the situation. Sarah, please, my leg is still healing. It's not drama, it's reality. But she wasn't listening. She never listened. She leaned in conspiratorially, but her voice carried across the room. You know, she said, louder now, her gaze sweeping over our assembled relatives. I think you're just enjoying the attention. The poor, helpless, invalid act. It gets you out of doing anything, doesn't it? You're just leeching off Mom and Dad. A few relatives chuckled. My aunt, always Sarah's biggest fan, let out a particularly hearty laugh. My cheeks burned. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a familiar mix of anger and humiliation. That's not fair, Sarah. I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. I'm in pain. That's when she did it. Before I could even react, she reached out, her hand clamping around the top of my left crutch. With a sudden, swift yank, she pulled it away. I gasped, my balance instantly gone. My injured leg buckled under me, the pain shooting through me like an electric current. I windmilled my arms, desperately trying to regain my footing, but it was useless. I hit the floor with a sickening thud, my bad leg twisting underneath me in a way it absolutely shouldn't have. The pain was excruciating, a white, hot agony that consumed everything. I cried out, a raw, involuntary sound. And then the worst part, I heard the laughter, not just Sarah's triumphant snicker, but the collective snorts and chuckles of my family. My aunt clapped her hand over her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with amusement. My parents, instead of rushing to my aid, were looking at Sarah with a mixture of exasperation, and I swear, a hint of pride, as if she'd just put me in my place. See, Sarah said, looking down at me, her voice dripping with contempt, totally faking it. If she was really hurt, she wouldn't be able to get up. As I lay there, tears blurring my vision, the searing pain in my leg momentarily eclipsing the emotional agony, I heard a new voice. Calm, authoritative, and utterly chilling. Excuse me, young lady. The laughter died instantly. A hush fell over the room, so sudden and complete it was almost deafening. I looked up through my tears and saw him, Dr. Evans, my surgeon. He was standing directly behind Sarah, his hand resting lightly, almost imperceptibly, on her shoulder. His eyes, usually kind and reassuring in the sterile environment of his office, were now like chips of ice, fixed on my sister. Sarah, caught completely off guard, froze. Her triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of bewildered terror. She tried to shrug off his hand, but he didn't move it. He simply tightened his grip, just enough to convey his displeasure without being overtly aggressive. "Perhaps you'd like to explain to me, Doctor," Evans continued, his voice still low but carrying immense weight, "why you just assaulted my patient, causing her to fall and potentially re-injure a leg that is still in a very delicate state of healing." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Sarah stammered, "Assault. She's faking it. She's been faking it for months, Doctor." Evan's gaze shifted to my parents, then to the other relatives who were now staring at him, utterly dumbfounded. "Faking it," he repeated, a dangerous edge to his voice. "This young woman," he said, indicating me with a nod, "underwent extensive surgery 6 months ago to repair a severely broken tibia and fibula. We inserted a plate and 8 screws into her leg. She has been diligently attending physical therapy, pushing through immense pain, and making remarkable progress. Progress that you," he turned back to Sarah, his voice rising slightly, "have just potentially undone with your reckless and cruel actions." My parents finally stirred. My dad, pale-faced, took a tentative step forward. "Dr. Evans, what are you doing here, Doctor?" Evans finally released Sarah's shoulder, turning his full attention to my parents. "I was invited," he said, his voice regaining its professional calmness, though his eyes remained hard, "by your daughter, to join your celebration. She mentioned she felt some of her family didn't fully understand the severity of her injury, and I thought a brief, informal chat might help clarify things. It seems I arrived at a rather opportune moment." He knelt beside me, his practiced hands gently checking my leg. The pain was still intense, but his presence, his sheer indignation on my behalf, was a balm to my shattered spirit. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, genuinely concerned. I think so," I whispered, trying to stifle a sob. "It hurts a lot." He helped me slowly, carefully, back to my feet, retrieving my crutch from where it had skittered across the floor. He leaned it against me, making sure I had my balance before he stood up again. "Your daughter," he addressed my parents, his voice now a quiet thunderclap, "has been suffering from a very serious injury. Her recovery is going to be long and difficult. To suggest she is faking it or leeching is not only incredibly insensitive, but medically ignorant. She relies on these crutches for mobility and stability. Taking one from her, particularly in a manner designed to make her fall, is dangerous and frankly abhorrent behavior. I'm afraid I won't be staying for the party, but I would strongly advise all of you to take her injury and her recovery far more seriously. She needs support, not ridicule." With that, he turned, gave me a small, sympathetic nod, and walked out of the house, leaving behind a silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. The aftermath was surreal. My parents, utterly mortified, finally rushed to my side, apologies tumbling out of them. Sarah stood frozen, her face ashen, looking utterly annihilated. The other relatives avoided eye contact, their laughter replaced by shamefaced silence. I didn't say a word. I just leaned heavily on my crutches, the pain in my leg a dull ache now, but the emotional scars still raw and fresh. My parents tried to fuss over me, offering me a chair, getting me water. I accepted their help, but I couldn't bring myself to look them in the eye. The damage had been done. Sarah, to her credit, eventually approached me. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I'm so sorry," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. I didn't know it was that serious. I really thought you were exaggerating." I just looked at her, my eyes filled with years of resentment, of feeling like the lesser sibling. "You never listened, Sarah," I said, my voice hoarse. "You never believed me." She started to cry, genuine tears, for the first time I could remember seeing from her in years. I didn't forgive her on the spot. It wasn't that easy. But Dr. Evans's unexpected appearance, his unwavering defense of me, it shifted something fundamental in our family dynamics. For the first time, they truly saw my pain. They truly understood the reality of my situation. It wasn't a quick fix, and it certainly didn't erase the hurt of that day, but it was a beginning. A very painful, very public, very necessary beginning. So that's my story. A truly unforgettable birthday, though not for the reasons my father intended. I still have a long way to go in my recovery, and the emotional scars from that day will probably always be with me. But I've learned a lot about who truly has my back and who doesn't. And sometimes you need an unexpected hero to step in and put things right. Like this video if you were on my side, because honestly, I felt so alone. Subscribe for more stories like this, where sometimes karma really does come knocking when you least expect it. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.